I speak often on this channel about persuasion. It's called Daily Persuasion after all, right? However, you need to be, as the Bible says, wise as a serpent and innocent as a dove. Today, we're going to get a little serpentine. Persuasion, my client Noah Ravoy likes to say, is a win-win situation. You find out what someone wants, you give it to them, and you communicate that effectively so that they will in return give you what you want. It's reciprocity. However, manipulation is win-lose. But you set it up so that you make the other person believe they've won until they find out that they've lost when it's too late. I think of the communist uprising that was first wave feminism. Wait, what did he just say? What did he just say? Communist uprising, feminism. What? What? A number of months ago, I wrote a piece about the women's suffrage movement, the 1890s. There was an opinion editorial, I believe it was in the year 1895, published in The Atlantic. Yes, The Atlantic. That was an argument against suffrage by a woman. Around that time, the state of Massachusetts had put up for women an opportunity to vote. Do you want to receive the right to vote? A whopping percentage, something as high as 95% of women said no. That opinion continued in subsequent years. And that might tick you off a little bit because you thought history was one thing and now it's another. What? Does not compute. Broke your brain a little bit there. That's okay. So then, why do we have a story that first wave feminism, particularly the insistence on voting rights for women, was something that everyone appealed with, or appealed to everyone, and everyone was down with? Well, a manipulation technique of the, interestingly enough, secular, atheist, anti-male women leaders, many of whom attempted or actually committed suicide, by the way, those feminist leaders of the first wave feminist movement. They studied with communists who were at that time worldwide engaging in illegal activities, criminal activities, domestic terrorism. Recall that Vladimir Lenin, the leader of the Bolshevik Revolution in 1917, his older brother attempted to launch a prior communist revolution in Russia and was captured and executed for his crimes. That is the environment of turn of the century, where those who were driven to envy and hate, bitterness, and a will for strife, organized. It's no secret that the revolution in 1917 began when the Soviets declared International Women's Day. All women laborers in Russia went on strike, supported by and organized by the communists, and thus began one of the most murderous periods of world history. Isn't that interesting? It began with feminism. Now, what exactly brought about the unleashing of voting rights to women in America? If the vast majority of women, didn't want them, well, they targeted the men. They targeted rich men. They targeted powerful men with threats and even follow-throughs on those threats of domestic terrorism. Did you know that? Tactics like firebombs, car bombs, assassination, kidnapping, all of these were on the table. give us what we want or else. That's manipulation. And it was these few atheistic communist feminists who won over enough rich and powerful men to back the movement, to back their movement, and decide on behalf of the population of the country. This is how all laws are decided, by the way. There are instigators, there are organizers, and then there's the people who decide. Scott Adams has famously said that the news assigns our opinions. We think we reason our way to our opinions. No, we don't. We barely have a choice on which media we have in our environment, our information environment, our info diet, as Michael Gimmerin likes to say. This is an example from recent history, maybe not living history for most of us, if not all of us. But this manipulation technique, do what I want or else, that's how a toddler attempts to persuade. That's how a small angry child not getting his way blackmails emotionally. Isn't that interesting? It was never about human rights. Isn't that sobering? Right now, the right, we'll say the fringe right, the sometimes reactionary right, has this position: we need to repeal the 19th Amendment. We need to take from women the right to vote, which is kind of silly because, number one, the vast majority of white women voted for Donald Trump, which is their guy, right? Our guy. So I think the gender wars are over. The gender war was started by these communists, these atheists who hated God, hated the law, and hated their husbands. So we should continue the war between the sexes? What good does that do? There will probably be some sort of weighted voting system in the future. And it might be a number of decades away, where the more civic responsibilities you adopt, the more additional voting rights you have. Because rights ought to be commensurate with responsibility. We understand this as a species and in society, and yet we try to do laws that try to hide that from us. So it might be something like every citizen has one right to vote. But the more civic and social responsibilities that you adopt and the more you're accountable for, the more additional voting credits that you have. That's probably the 1 to 2 generation away. Let's say reform for voting. Because it doesn't necessarily make sense that I have the same, as just a private citizen, not being a veteran, have the same one man, one vote system to pick any character who is wealthier, more influential, more powerful, and with a lot more to lose than I do. And both of us have to follow the same law, and perhaps that law affects him way more than me. He's way more of a stakeholder, a shareholder. That doesn't make any sense. So this is not about sexes, it's about responsibility. In the past, immutable characteristics were proxies for responsibility. For example, suffrage used to be only available to, white land-owning male citizens of a certain age. And the idea then was that those were proxies for a citizen who had adopted civic responsibility and therefore would receive rights. But those proxies break down nowadays. And so new proxies will be created to try to recouple rights and responsibilities. It might be a little awkward. There will be a lot of screeching and clawing and weeping and gnashing of teeth from liberals, as one expects. But there will not need to be manipulation because it will make sense. You get what you pay for. There's no free lunch. Furthermore, the authority you have ought to be commensurate with what you have sacrificed for it. The more influence you have, needs to be based on the more you've given up to have that influence. That only makes sense. Sacrifice, accountability, rights, responsibilities. You probably didn't expect it to go in this direction, did you? Now you might be wondering, in what ways are you being blackmailed by the atheistic, communist, feminists in your life? Oh, I mean, in what ways might you be the target of manipulation? We may not be able to affect change at the national level quite yet, any of us individually. But think of this. What would happen if you critically examined all of your relationships and you wondered, who is using this whole, if I don't get what I want, I'll do this to you frame, and making you feel like that's only fair? Manipulators own your mind first. They gaslight. They make an unfair perspective seem fair to you. So they'll say, I win, you lose. But they'll dress up the loss as a win by saying, it's only fair you give this to me. I can be kind to you again. I'll love you again. I'll sleep with you again. Ooh. Did I just hit the button? I just hit the button, didn't I? What would happen if you didn't care? What would happen if you didn't have needs? What would happen if you didn't need that validation from your manipulator? There were a number of women who said, if you vote for Trump, I'm not sleeping with you anymore, to their boyfriends, their fiancés, and their husbands. What would happen if the husband said, okay, and then went and voted for Trump and took a picture of it so that they could prove it to their wives, their girlfriends? What would happen? You would be free. Freedom is a choice, and you have it available to you. It's in business, it's in your personal life, maybe your closest relationships. You have at least one manipulator who is making you take the L, but telling you it's a W, and that's the right thing to do. Be a man. Man up. Using this kind of language to set it up so that you taking the loss is actually a win for integrity, character, honor, etc. It's an identity offer. You get to prove to me you are a good person, that you are the person I say that you are. Prove that you're these things. Remember what Satan said. Prove that you're the Son of God. Do these things. That's manipulation. What does he have to prove? He just is. Every manipulator is made in that image. Think about that. That's Satan, the accuser, the devil. The stories of the Bible does that with Jesus Christ. Think about that. And then you realize that atheistic feminist communism is anti-human and it's anti-Christian. Take that to heart. It's possible to be free. But the first place you must be free is in your mind. And that's free from guilt, shame, blame, and other tools of manipulation. If you don't do this for me, I'll do this to you. Or if you do this for me, then you get to be the good person I know you to be. You get to decide if you're a good person or not the manipulator. Do that, and the truth will set you free.